Hey there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to Trip Talks. This is the show where I interview successful e-commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders, and ask questions about free, and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today, I'm really excited to welcome Isabelle Steichen to the show. Isabelle is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Lupii. Lupii makes lupini-based snacks and pasta that are good for humans and also the planet. And today I'm going to ask Isabel a few questions about her entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that she has used to start and grow her business. So thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank you
Isabel.
so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So really interesting business. First of all, I'm wondering what is Lupini and how did you do this? Yeah, and what motivated you to start this business?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is the number one question that we get asked. So lupini is a legume, a bean that is originally from Europe, from the Mediterranean, and it's been consumed in Italy and Greece and Portugal for a very long time. And that is because it has really unique nutritional functionality. And even centuries ago, there's some tales around the Romans consuming lupini beans and gladiators consuming lupini beans because they knew that they were making them strong somehow. And so
Mm.
there was an awareness around the nutritional potency of the ingredient. And it's a unique bean because it has more protein than any other bean that's out there. It's also a complete protein. So it has all nine essential amino acids, which is very rare in the plant-based space. It's also packed with fiber. And on top of that, it happens to be naturally low in carbs. So it really hits kind of all three main consumer claims that US consumers are shopping for these days. And then on the other side, it also, environmentally speaking, is an incredible ingredient. It's a regenerative crop, rotation crop, great for soil health and resource efficient to grow. And the reason why I've been obsessed with this ingredient and my co-founder Alexandra as well is because we have seen a real shift among US consumers to eat more plant-based. And I would say this first generation of plant-based foods was a lot about mimicking an animal-based food, especially in the meat and dairy replacement space. And the unfortunate part of that is that a lot of those propositions are highly processed and overly engineered and using lots of protein isolates and additives. And so we see a vision to build the next generation of plant-based protein foods around more wholesome ingredients, and lupini is one of them. And that's kind of how we envision to build this platform for this ingredient across different categories of the grocery store, where we can add these unique functional um, additions around protein, fiber, and carbs.
That's really interesting because, I grew up in India. I'm a vegetarian. I grew up with, and I'm always looking for, the next best protein source. It's
Right.
interesting. I never heard about lupini. I found like the brown rice protein. I found the Greek yogurt. I do eat a lot of legumes, but is it that this zucchini protein is just not well known in North America and it's more known in Europe, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's thousands of ingredients that we don't know about that are used in other cultures or parts of the world. And when you look at, I think I might be butchering my stat here, but is it 70% of Americans get fed by, three or four different animals and five different plants? That's pretty crazy, right? I mean, the majority of food comes from a very small proposition. And I think that in the last 10, 20 years, we've seen a lot of new ingredients come to the table or come back to the table. Like when we think about the rise of chickpeas in the United States in the last few years, we think about quinoa and chia seeds. All of those are not new ingredients. They have been around for a very long time. There just was no consumer interest in them,
Hmm.
maybe in certain parts of the world. And I think the trajectory for lupini is very similar. The moment needed to be ripe for this ingredient to take off in the US. And we're feeling pretty excited that this is the right moment to introduce the small but mighty lupini bean to the US consumer.
Definitely. I mean, there's definitely uh, a very high level of awareness of sustainable and protein-based diets and so forth. What were you doing before starting the business? Like, did you start this business because you're just entrepreneurial, or was it something that, you were trying to solve the problem for yourself, and then you wanted to bring it to other people also?
Yeah, I would say probably a little bit of both. So I have been vegan for 10 years now and was vegetarian before. I grew up in Europe. I moved to the States in 2013, and that was when I transitioned from a vegetarian to a vegan diet against my European family's will. Um, and I was motivated initially by ethical reasons and then environmental, and then I started learning about all the health benefits of a plant-focused diet. I ended up getting certified in plant-based nutrition. And professionally, I had been working in startups. So I spent most of my career working for early stage startups, mostly in the tech space. I worked for various tech companies, software companies, and then one more food related business. And in my free time, I just started soaking up all information that I could find about the plant based food space because I was a consumer in that space myself. I ended up starting a podcast a few years ago called The Plantiful, where I was interviewing
Mm,
plant change makers across industries. And the more I was talking to people in the space, the more I realized that plant-based was starting to go mainstream in the US, but consumers were really looking for high quality plant-based protein sources. And especially Americans are really concerned about nutritionals, and protein is top of mind. And so that's what brought me on this journey, because I wasn't eating a lot of the plant-based protein foods because,
mm,
like I mentioned before, they were so highly processed, they didn't make me feel good. I wanted to eat more simple foods that were nutritionally and functionally beneficial at the same time. And I knew that that was possible. And so that brought me back to my roots. I grew up in Luxembourg. Lots of my friends were Italian and Portuguese growing up. And they have been eating lupini for centuries in
mm.
those cultures. So I always knew about them, and I started researching them in depth, talking to some farmers in Europe and growers over there, and some entrepreneurs. And the more I was uncovering about the ingredient, the more I saw that this was the perfect solution for the US consumer.
Mhm. And your approach to bringing this ingredient to market, I've spoken with other entrepreneurs with similar ideas, who are starting protein-based bars, kind of business, and their approach is, they 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 create something in their own kitchen. They try it out. They share it with their friends, get the feedback, and based on that, they start the business. Was your approach like something like that, or was your approach more business, where you put a business plan together that this is, this could be a good ingredient, and then go from there, like hiring a professional kitchen or something?
Yeah, so I would say it was probably more number one. That being said, I mentioned I spend a lot of time doing research. I feel like I'm a researcher at heart. I love being in school and went to grad school. And if I could go back to school, I would do that any day. I love learning. And I was really spending a lot of time digging through information, both research on nutritional benefits around lupini beans, agricultural ways of growing them, some case studies of other businesses in Europe. So I had an awareness of what the opportunity could look like, but I also am practical. And so I started ordering lupini beans online and through some supplies that I found, and ordered them to my home kitchen and started playing around. And I always had the vision to build a brand around the ingredients. So it wasn't that I first had a product idea and then I fit in lupini beans. It was the other way around. It was, how am I going to introduce this novel ingredient to the US market? What is
Mm,
the right format to do that in terms of consumer receptiveness, but also where can I fill a white space? And so I had played around with various different ideas in my kitchen. I actually had looked at some plant-based jerky propositions, some spreads, some baked goods. I had played around with bars, and then I got a food handler's license
mm,
and got certified. And a friend of mine had a commercial kitchen here in New York City because he was running a restaurant, and so I asked him if I could use his commercial kitchen to make the prototypes and start
mm,
selling them. And so
mm,
the OG version of the Lupii bar, I started making that by hand in a commissary kitchen and sold it at one store down the street from me in Brooklyn. Way before Lupii was born, and we didn't have any branding, but there was some early traction and interest. And there was also a way for me to understand if there was even feasibility with this concept. And I realized that that was the case. And so then I took that idea and packaged it up a little bit nicer into a PowerPoint presentation. And then I pitched it to a venture studio here in New York City. And they were very excited about the opportunity. And I went and searched for co-founder and found Ali, got very lucky. And we pitched this concept together and raised some pre-seed capital to grow the business and actually find a co-man and start, making it a more real business versus just me in my kitchen.
So so Lupii is a venture funded business.
Yeah, we raised some venture money, some early stage venture money, and a lot of angel money. So industry veterans have invested in our business, and then we also have raised on Republic, which is a crowdfunding platform that lets you raise equity money through very small checks. So most of those investments came from our consumers after we had been in business, which is amazing for two reasons. One, because it's validation that we're onto something. And then secondly, it is incredible to be able to help democratize the venture model and give our consumers who are helping us to actually build this business, because they're purchasing our products, to give them the opportunity to also be part of the upside potential of the business.
That's very interesting. I've definitely heard about some of these other crowdfunding sources, but Republic, it seems like a very interesting idea. Is it kind of very similar to what some of these other crowdfunding platforms were in the beginning, where people are there trying to look to invest even a small sum of money into interesting ideas, so you don't have to do like a lot of marketing, and it's easy to raise funds? Or how did you?
I mean, I would say it's never easy to raise money, but I would say it's kind of, there's two models, I guess. Generally, there's the Kickstarter type of model that usually means you're investing, but that really means in return you're getting product usually or service. With Republic, you're actually investing into a safe note, which is similar to a convertible note. And that means that at one point, once the company raises an equity round, your investment converts into equity in the business. And so that's one of the main differences. In terms of, is it easy? I think, there these platforms like Republic where we raise, they are becoming more and more visible, and a lot of people are starting to know about them. Republic was more of a tech-focused platform initially, but there's more and more sustainable food brands that have successfully raised on there. And they obviously have a big audience that they are promoting the different campaigns to. But then there's also, the brand has to do a lot of legwork. We spend a lot of time sending out information about this campaign to our consumer base. We had the unfortunate luck to launch 2 months before the pandemic. So most of our business initially was direct to consumer, but then here's the other side of the coin. That was amazing because we were able to message our consumers directly about this campaign and bring them along our journey of building. So there's definitely a need for the company to push as well and do marketing. But Republic was super helpful also.
A little bit on your finding a co-founder. I mean, you mentioned that first you went to venture companies, and then you went out to find a co-founder. Yeah. Was it a requirement from them to find a co-founder before they will fund your company? And I mean, how do you find a co-founder at a short notice? Like, that seems like a pretty risky idea.
Yeah. So, okay. So I had just left my job and I had this idea. I didn't really know, usually I'm a planner, and I would never have left my previous job at a software company if I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan. I just needed some space to think in my head. And, I was working for an early stage startup at the time, and there was no space for that. So, but I had this concept, and I had been spending time in my free time building some ideas around what is now Lupii. I ended up, getting in touch with venture studio Human Ventures in New York City, and they are an early stage venture studio and investor, and they're industry agnostic, but they usually the first check-in, oftentimes pre-launch, just at concept stage. And so I spent a little bit of time, a few months with them, iterating on some things, and ended up pitching them the concept for Lupii. And their thesis is that they will only invest in co-founding teams. So they believe that, you need a village to build something. And I share that deeply. So that wasn't, even though it was a requirement for me, it was obviously I was in agreement with that. And I deeply believe in having various backgrounds and ideas and skill sets to make something successful. And so I went on a quest. Literally, I built an Excel spreadsheet and had like 70 plus coffees and calls with various different people. Some of them came through the Human Ventures Network. Some of them were from my previous network. I had done this extrusion program at Texas A&M a few years ago to learn if I could extrude lupini beans. So I met some people in the food industry through that, reached out to everyone, really broad at the beginning, just trying to understand who is that co-founder that I'm looking for? What's the profile? I have an operations and sales background. I don't know anything about marketing and branding. So it became clear quickly that that was kind of the profile I was looking for. But I think a lot of this is luck, and I got really lucky. 2.5 months in, I was introduced to Ali by one of her former coworkers of Pepsi. And we just grabbed a casual coffee, both not having any expectations. And it turned out that not only did she have an incredible background, she had worked in food and beverage for a long time, had a really amazing branding and marketing background, but she also was kind of ready to jump and do something, startup-y and leave Pepsi, which was incredible and very unique. And I can tell you, you don't come across that every day. And so a few weeks later, she decided to jump on board with me. And then we went back out to Human Ventures, the two of us as a team, repitched the concept, and they put in the first check in the business.
That's a very interesting story, and yeah, very, very interesting. In terms of creating a brand like this, I think one big challenge probably is around educating the market, and how do you share your value proposition in the market? Because these days there are so many different kind of protein bars out there with something a little bit different, protein content. Some are targeted towards a certain lifestyle and things like this. When most of the people don't know what lupini bean is, how do you was that a big challenge or a big nut to crack for your business? I mean, at the beginning, but even now, and how are you dealing with that?
That is a nut that we're trying to crack every day. Introducing a new ingredient is the challenge and the opportunity at the same time, right? I think amazing, incredible brands have been built around new ingredients. I think of Banza, the chickpea pasta. I think of Vita Coco, the coconut water. I think of Mama Chia and for chia seeds. There has been a cauliflower around cauliflower. There have been incredible brand platforms built around single ingredients. And the lift is always the education. So it's always about making it clear to consumers why choose this versus anything else that's out there in the market. Now, one thing that we know that consumers are looking for in the protein aisle, in the bar protein aisle, but also generally in the plant-based protein aisle, is more alternatives. Most of the plant-based protein today is soy and pea, especially in bars. That's the plant-based options, 95% of them. And what we have heard a lot from consumers and buyers is where are the alternatives? We want something else. We don't want to eat soy anymore. There's a lot of challenges around soy, and a lot of consumers in the US are moving away from it for perceived health reasons as well as environmental reasons. Pea protein is actually not that nutritionally dense. It's not even that high in protein. So clearly the time is there, and there's a consumer need for alternatives. So we're not trying to sell people on something they don't need. We're trying to educate them on why this is the response to what they're looking for, which is a little bit of a, less of a lift, but still there's a lot of storytelling that goes into building our brand. And the way we position Lupii is really around the hero ingredient, our queen bean, the lupini bean, which is in bars, but now we just entered the pasta aisle as well. And the vision is to, progressively go into different aisles of the grocery store, which will also help with creating the narrative around the bean, its functionality, but also brand awareness. Being able to meet your customers in different aisles of the grocery store is definitely a way to create marketing efficiencies. So that's part of our strategy around educating consumers.
And does the education, I mean, one thing that you mentioned was, you started the business a couple of months before COVID. So was most of your education part, did it occur through advertising or online? Or because
Yeah.
I've spoken with other founders, and one of the approach that comes up again and again is, they will set up table inside the store and hand
Totally.
out samples and educate, and that's one way. How
Yeah.
did you do it?
So that's really hitting the nail on the head. In food, I think there are very little native D2C brands. I think most food brands still will be built in retail, and especially a new brand and a new ingredient, you have to be in physical stores and you have to meet your customers, sample and demo to drive trial and get product into people's mouths so they can try it and hopefully they'll love it and they come back for more. That is the number one marketing and conversion tool. If we don't do anything else, we have to do that because that's what's really going to move the needle in these early stages. Now, you're right. We launched right before the pandemic, so there was no sampling and demoing. We tried to get product into people's hands in other ways through, sending out. There were a lot of boxes, like gift boxes and sampling boxes that were going around during the pandemic. So we would try to be in every one of those. Once some events started resuming again, some races and things like that, fitness events, we started donating product there. But most of our education was online, direct to consumer. We partnered up with some amazing YouTubers and Instagram influencers that were able to help us with the storytelling. That being said, I can tell you since we entered retail at the beginning of this year, nothing has worked as well as sampling and demoing the product because not only are you giving people the product to try, but you also usually have a brand ambassador that gives you the two-liner and the story behind it. And that's very hard to do online. And especially in this day and age, capturing people's attention online is really difficult. So we're very excited that we're in retail now and we're able to actually connect with our customers directly there in store.
Yeah, I mean, I saw on your website there's like a huge list of retail, so you're definitely very well penetrated there. How, like, are you going yourself in retail stores? Are you doing some of that on your own? Are you hiring, like, have you hired like in some sort of a company agency that helps you with that? How does that occur?
Yeah, so all the first stores I opened myself, literally going down the street in Brooklyn, Manhattan. And then the way it works with larger retailers, like we are in Whole Foods, for example, in the Northeast region, it's a little different. It's more of an application program. So usually a retailer will review your category once a year. They will require a presentation. If they're interested, they might have a call or a meeting with you. They'll review the data. They'll see, what their data is telling them from their stores, what consumer needs are. And then if you're lucky and you have the right proposition, they'll take you into store and then you roll out in that retailer. Even still, that is a very personal process. And all of our accounts to date, I have closed myself. Ali and I have closed ourselves. We do have a broker. The way brokers work is that they help you prepare any documents for submission. They help you think through promo planning. Once you are working with a retailer, they will remind you to plan your promotions for the year and things like that. So it's a little bit more administrative, but it would say nobody is better at selling your brand at this stage as the founders. Like that, it is probably not a good investment to hire anyone to do sales for you. I think founders should do that themselves at the early stages.
And how are you finding being in retail as this new brand? Um, Also with respect to like manufacturing and getting the cash flow going and making sure the product is just not sitting in the stores.
Yeah.
Are there any challenges around that? How are you managing that whole process?
Oh my God, yes. That is very different than direct to consumer, right? The cash flow cycle in D2C is really beautiful because it's instant. And planning is a little bit easier as well. With retail, it's a little harder. Lead times are really long. From when Whole Foods said yes to us to when we actually landed on shelf, it was 7 months. So in some ways it's good because you have time to prepare and get your inventory ready, but you also don't really have data yet, so you don't really know what your forecast will be exactly. You can always work with comps, but it's, you never know until you're in store. So cash flow management is really something that we're very focused on. There are solutions out there that do inventory financing. So once you get POs from retailers and distributors, you can start financing against that. But obviously, it's different than a software business. The product doesn't get created in a second. You have to plan ahead. You have to make sure you have packaging, inventory, and all the ingredients, and you coordinate with your co-packer. So that's something that's one of the parts of the business that we spend most of our time managing and making sure that we have enough product, not too much. And then that product moves in retail is also important. And that's really done through marketing and merchandising. So we have teams on the ground that make sure that our product is on shelf when it sells out, reminds the buyer to reorder, that the pricing is correct, that when we're on promo, it's displayed correctly. And then, as I said, we're doing a lot of in-store marketing to move product and get people to purchase.
What does your team look like right now? In
Yeah,
terms
you're
of doing
looking at
everything? I mean, how
50%.
I don't know if I should ask you this. Like, how? I mean, it seems like you only started like what, 3 years ago. How big is your business?
Yes. So just you're looking at 50% of the team. So it's myself and then my
Okay.
co-founder Ali full time. And then we have some incredible partners. Like I said, we have merchandisers that are on the ground. We are working with some really great demoing people. All of those are contractors. They're not, part
Okay.
of the team all the time. We have a fantastic branding agency that does all of our packaging design. We have some great people now that are helping us with supply chain management and forecasting. That the business is starting to get bigger, but it's just the two of us full time. And I can tell you, we're definitely ready to grow the team, but it's all a question of timing and finding the right people as well.
Okay. So right now, I mean, I'm assuming you're considering your business more and more being in the retail store rather than a direct to consumer.
Yes. I mean, I would say, we're in 2022, omni-channel is the name of the game. You have to be available online as well. But for us, the way we think about the channels is you have retail, Amazon, and D2C. We really think as retail, our main focus, along with Amazon, because we really see Amazon as an online retailer. There's already, what is it, like 70% of Americans that have an Amazon Prime membership. I mean, that is a place that we don't have to drive people to. They're already going there organically. And then D2C, we see more as a billboard for the brand and an education tool. We obviously sell through the website, both the pasta and the bars, but where we're focusing most of our energy is on retail and then on Amazon as well.
Do you have any competitors who are using the same ingredient? I mean, do you think that you heavy lift right now to educating the market, and then competitor comes in and
Yeah.
on all of that?
Yeah, that's always the endless conversation around first mover advantage or not. Well, we're actually not the very first mover. We're one of the first ones. There's a company out there called Brahmi. They have a pickled zucchini bean, and they actually just launched a wheat-based pasta as well. So they launched a few years before us. And then there's some other companies that have entered the market that are using lupini. There's a protein powder company. There's some companies that are using lupini beans in their cookies to add more functionality. So we're definitely one of the early movers. We're not the very first one. And, the more the better, because the more brands that are educating consumers, the more we're sharing that, marketing burden. That is the biggest lift for all of us.
So I'm assuming that, as you said, first you were in the bar market, now you're doing pasta. I'm assuming in the future you're going to get into more and more categories. Does protein powder, does this product work well for a protein powder?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm definitely looking for a good protein powder already.
Yeah. So you could definitely make a protein powder out of lupini beans, and there are options also in Europe that are using it. From a guardrail perspective, as a brand right now, we don't want to overly process the ingredients. So we're actually using the whole bean in our bar. So you don't only get the protein, but also the fiber. We're not looking to go into protein powders quite yet because it's a hyper processed ingredient. Protein isolates are usually stripped of a lot of nutrients, and then you have to add a bunch of stuff into it so that it tastes palatable. That's definitely not on our radar in the short term. We're really trying to highlight the incredible nutritional benefits in the whole food format. So trying to keep it as clean as possible in terms of label. But the options are endless. And, when you look to Europe, there's so many options on the market there, dairy and meat replacements, snacks, baked goods, dips and sauces that are using lupini beans. So it's an incredibly versatile ingredient.
I mean, to me, it seems like you've definitely done a lot of research into this whole category and industry. How many? What was the time period when you got a seed of an idea, you started doing research, and actually, doing the pitching of this
Yeah.
idea to investors? How much time did that take to like really research and uh,
Yeah. I mean, you need to keep in mind, I was working full time when I first started thinking about this and researching it. And when I did that extrusion program as well, I was working in a different job. So I probably started researching the ingredient around 2017, 2018. And then we didn't really pitch it to investors until December of 2018. So I'd say a year and a half or so of, casual lupini research before I left my job and really started working on this more full time.
um, as an entrepreneur, what I mean, you've definitely done a lot of right things. I mean, it may have been difficult to get to having the from idea to where you are right now. What do you attribute that to? I mean, is it really about just um, sticking to it? You're just problem solving every little problem that comes up. Is it something around being entrepreneurial and being flexible? What do you attribute your ability to bring this idea to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a variety of different things. I think one thing that I know for myself is passion plays a huge role. I have worked in some jobs that I did very well in, but I did not enjoy it because I didn't feel personally, emotionally connected to it. So that for me is a big driver that keeps me motivated. I think that my endurance is way longer when I have passion for something and really care. Um, Curiosity, like I said before, I'm kind of a researcher at heart. I love learning, and I think building a business is an endless learning opportunity, which is really incredible and incredibly exciting to have this like practical experiment in front of you. So that is really exciting. And endurance, not taking no for an answer and not kind of letting yourself get distracted, but then also equally it's important. I think sometimes entrepreneurs get so obsessed with something that they don't want to hear if there's not product market fit. I understand that can be a problem when you're building a business that you care about deeply. So I think it's important to be able to reflect as well, and finding amazing mentors and people to surround yourself with. I think it takes a village to build a business. I think that learning from others who have done it before, who have experience, is so valuable. So finding mentors that you trust, that you can take along the journey and get advice from, is really crucial.
Now, in every entrepreneur's journey, there's always failures, mistakes made, lessons learned. In your entrepreneurial journey, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome, or the mistakes made, failures, and what have you learned from that? What can other entrepreneurs learn from your mistakes?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like so many, right? I think you're always smarter after the fact. One big thing is I spent my career working for early stage startups, and I used to think that the faster the better. And I actually don't think that anymore, even though that is my essence professionally and even maybe personally. That's how I like to operate. I don't think that that's always the right mantra. I think that doing something thoughtfully and well and with focus is really important, and that there's this culture around startups that you have to move fast and break fast and go up in flames if it's not working in 1 year.
Mhm.
I just don't think that's how good businesses are built, especially in the food and beverage industry. It takes 1 year to grow a crop, mostly, most of the time. So then you cannot make something happen overnight. And I think patience and thoughtfulness is really important. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be agile and nimble and adaptable, but I think both can work together. And what I'm trying to find as I'm building this business is that kind of intersection between being patient and thoughtful, but also being flexible and adapting and moving and making decisions when it's necessary.
By the way, what was your role in those startups? Were you in sales or were you more
I was mostly in operations, and then I
okay?
had some sales roles as well. Yeah. So, yeah, a little bit of both.
So now I'm going to move on to our rapid fire segment. And in this segment, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions and you have to answer them maybe in one word or one sentence. So the first one is one book recommendation for entrepreneurs and why?
Okay, I don't know if I can do one sentence, but I'm going to try to keep it short. I obviously love all the classics in the startup space, and I admire people like Adam Grant. I think they are teaching a lot about leadership skills. That being said, one of my favorite things is reading biographies of other entrepreneurs, or they don't even have to be entrepreneurs. I just think I personally find reading people's life stories more helpful in getting practical, tangible information than necessary these like self-help entrepreneur books. So some of the really good ones that I've read this year are definitely Steve Jobs is a classic, but I just read that biography a few months ago, and that was incredibly inspirational. And then there's a book that I love that is not, directly entrepreneurial, but something that I find very inspiring. It's called Bravey by Alexi Pappas. She's a female writer, but also former Olympian, and her personal story is so powerful, and so many pieces of her journey are very transferable to an entrepreneur's journey.
Great. Uh, an innovative product or idea in the current e-commerce, retail, or tech landscape that you feel excited about?
I'm really excited about sustainable fashion. Along with my
Yeah.
journey of becoming plant-based and thinking about the environment, I started thinking a lot about the rest of my consumption habits. And there's a company that I look up to is called The Big Favorite. It's a closed loop undergarment company. And Al, the founder, is incredibly inspiring. And the business that she's building is so thoughtful, and her products are high quality, and she's trying to really build something that is actually sustainable in the fashion space. So that's really cool product.
A business or productivity tool or software that you would recommend or a productivity tip?
You know, my number one productivity tool is really unsexy. It's called sleep. And I know that when I don't sleep enough and don't take care of my sleep hygiene, I can have all the tools and all the asanas and slacks in the world, and that doesn't help me. So I would recommend everyone to find what is their sweet spot of sleep and really try to be disciplined about that.
What is your sweet spot? 6 hours, 7 hours,
No, it's really 8 hours. I mean, that's
eight
the other
hours?
part, that we always were taught in the startups that I worked for, that you don't have to sleep. You can sleep when you're dead. That's kind of ridiculous. And
Hmm.
so I definitely need 8 hours ideally. That doesn't mean I get 8 hours every night, but that's what I'm aiming for.
Do you nap in the during the daytime also, like a half an hour thing or something, or no?
Not really. I only when I'm sick, I guess, but then sometimes on weekends, I'm training for a half marathon right now, and the longer runs on weekends are really tiring. So I find myself sometimes napping on the weekend, and I'm like, I understand why people do this for 30 minutes. I just am worried that if I started napping, I would just fall asleep and be asleep for 2 hours. But I hear it's working for some people.
A startup or business in e-commerce, retail, or tech that you think is currently doing great things?
There's a lot of food companies that I look up to. There is one company, Partake Cookies, that is a retail focused allergy-free cookie and baking mix company. And Denise, the founder, is fantastic. And I think the products are fantastic as well. And she's been able to build a really focused, successful business. So I'm definitely excited about that.
So as you were, building this business, like, did you seek out some of these other business people who are in the same industry and get in touch with them, or how did you
Yeah,
find them?
definitely. Oh my God, I find nothing more helpful than talking to other food and beverage founders. So I definitely organically at the beginning was introduced to some, but now I'm part of a number of communities here in New York that are incredibly fruitful for me. And I'm always trying to connect with other food and beverage founders.
A peer entrepreneur or business person whom you look up to, or someone who inspires you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm always just talking about food people, but someone I really admire is Allie Kane. She's a founder of a sauce company called Haven's Kitchen. She used to have a brick and mortar store and then had to close that during the pandemic, but launched a sauce company that is now, I think, in like Whole Foods nationwide and hundreds of retailers. And she also has a fantastic food industry podcast called In the Sauce. She's just amazing.
Awesome. And last question, best business advice you ever received when you were an entrepreneur?
Best business advice. I mean, kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's go slow to go faster. So being thoughtful and trying to do it right. And maybe spending a little bit more time on it, usually has a better outcome on the other side.
Well, those were all the questions that I had today, Isabel. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your story, for sharing, how you went from idea to bringing your idea to life. So yeah, thank you so much again for sharing your story and inspiring other entrepreneurs. Really,
Of
really appreciate it.
course. Thank you so much for having me. It was great being here.
Thank you.
Bye.